It's like fear mongering. It's just like, all of the instances that we hear about, it's like one or two kids or one kid, or, there's less than 10 athletes, as Charlie Baker was saying, out of 510,000. And it's being, propositioned to people, whether it's in, political campaigns or just general hate speech, that, they're taking over women's sports and we have to protect women from women's sports. I mean, I've always just thought that was very laughable to hear those types of people say that they want to protect women's sports and that they care about women's sports so much when they've literally never been here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. So Megan Rapinoe wrote a piece for Marie Claire, and she was talking about trans athletes, and nothing has changed. She is still very much out of touch, still doesn't have a clue, and she's still pushing this fear-mongering. She accuses those who stick up for women and girls of fear-mongering, by the way, yet she is the one peddling old talking points that have since been debunked, that have been proven to be completely unfounded. It is just idiotic for her to bring up these same points in 2026. When people have eyes, people have ears. We're seeing the IOC implement their new policies before our very eyes. And none of what she has said has happened. All of this talk about genital inspections and that sort of thing, she's still talking like that.
If the government is allowed to sex test all girls athletes and young women athletes, then they're the ones that get to decide what particular type of woman is acceptable.
It is absolutely ridiculous. So in the Marie Claire piece, she said the following. So the headline of the piece is anti-trans legislation isn't about protecting girls, it's about distracting us from what matters. And she's been pushing this idea that it isn't about protecting girls. That's just an excuse that people use to be bigots.
It's not about the protection of girls at all. It's just fear-mongering in order to whip people up. And it's really sad. And again, in most of the cases, it's like a couple of kids.
And what a disgusting statement to make when we've had multiple girls come forward, many women and girls come forward telling their stories, which I'm sure she's never listened to any of them, revealing what exactly they've been through. We've had lawsuits. There's even a lawsuit going on right now in Connecticut. Young girls in high school who have been in the court system for years fighting this.
There are 27 states that have said sex-based categories are what we're going with because biology matters. And the court affirmed resoundingly that that is not only constitutional, but it is consistent with Title IX. Now we take this to the 23 states that aren't protecting women and girls, and we insist that they do. We have litigation at Alliance Defending Freedom that's going on in some of those states right now. And I think what's important to remember is actually the first case filed was on behalf of Connecticut high school athletes running track. That case is still going on right now, and we intend to win it on behalf of all women and girls. But it takes all of us to do this. It's not just the lawyers. It's the moms and dads that need to stand up to their school boards and their counties and their city governments.
Chelsea, you're in college now. I'm assuming you still run. Why are you suing now about what happened back then in high school?
Well, I actually sued my senior year of high school, and that was because all 4 years of my high school experience, I raced against these two biological males who ended up taking 4 state championships, 2 All-New England awards, and countless other opportunities for myself to advance. And it's not fair to force females to participate against biological males, and so that's why I ended up suing.
So what do you want from this? Do you want the record restored to reflect who actually won?
Right. I mean, it's not fair that these biological males took these titles from myself and other girls, and so the record should reflect that. But also, we want the policy reversed so that no other female in Connecticut has to go through the same thing that I went through.
That is a case to look out for, by the way. We've had a lot of examples before our very eyes explaining what these girls have been through, what these women have been through. Ever since Riley Gaines first came out, well, there's been a lot of women since Riley Gaines, a lot of high school girls, middle school girls, elite athletes come forward and tell their stories. Yet she's still claiming that it's not about women and girls. We're so obsessed with somebody's identity, how they identify. We just don't want them to be their true, authentic selves. That's what this is all about, apparently. Nothing to do with protecting girls from abuse. Nothing to do with women and girls not wanting to see male genitalia in their locker rooms. Nothing to do with scholarships. She's very big on female athletes being paid the same as men. I mean, that's a whole new debate. But she's got nothing to say about girls having their scholarships stolen from them by men, by boys. Nothing to say about that.
I was in my end of the year meeting and my coach had said that they actually were not going to be giving me the scholarship that they had verbally promised me, that I had felt like I'd earned, played all these years of club. My whole goal, my entire time, was to get my school paid for and to play the sport that I loved. And so I felt pretty betrayed, especially since I was in the same position as the man that was on my team.
Nothing to say about the fact that women have enough to deal with in sports, with being taken seriously in sports, without having to deal with men saying that they're women and now taking the accolades that belong to females, taking the records that belong to females, taking the prize money. She's got nothing to say about that. And Dan Zazeski from Outkick, or now Fox News, he said, Rapinoe calls it anti-trans legislation, which is of course inaccurate. It's pro-woman legislation. It's ironic that she says the legislation is a distraction while using purposefully misleading language that is meant to distract the reader from the truth. Apparently, Megan Rapinoe was set to film a World Cup commercial, but she claims the brand decided to cut her from the ad because of her radical left-wing stance on males competing in women's sports. She then criticises the unnamed brand for lacking moral clarity because it doesn't want to be associated with someone like Rapinoe. Of course, the exact opposite is true. It's Rapinoe that clearly lacks moral clarity. That is what psychologists like to call projection. And the fact is, rather than just playing football or soccer, she made it all political. She made it all about her left-wing, far left agenda. That's what she is known for. She's not known for playing soccer as much as she is known for pushing her political agenda, for taking the knee, and all of these things, the race baiting, purporting to speak, for the black community and all of this sort of thing. Turning a blind eye to girls and women facing abuse, that is lacking moral clarity. Putting the desires of men who pretend to be women, who want to dress like women, above the rights of real women and girls, that is lacking moral clarity. Putting your political agenda before the safety and well-being of women and girls, while claiming to be an advocate for women and girls, is lacking moral clarity. Not listening to women and girls and what they are telling you, that they don't want to share locker rooms with men, that they don't want to compete against men. Not listening to them and living in some delusional world where you call them trans girls and trans women and compare men to black women, saying that it's racist to not be for men competing against women and girls, is lacking moral clarity. She said girls of colour are the first to be targeted and questioned about their bodies. Trying to conflate black women with men. What does that say about you, Megan? What does that say about how you perceive black women? She claims that keeping males out of women's sports will cause women to suffer the most. Of course, there's zero evidence of that, and once again, the opposite is true. So this is her pushing that lie that women are going to be subjected to genital inspections, that women are going to be judged on their appearance. No. All they're going to test for is whether you have XX or XY chromosomes. It's got nothing to do with how you look. Then she moves to her first point. Women across the country are being stripped of reproductive rights and being left to bleed out in hospital parking lots. That has been debunked a long time ago. What year does she think we're living in? It's once again ironic that the headline of the article talks about distraction, and her very first argument is to pull focus from the issue at hand and tell everyone, but what about abortion? Also, the idea that women are left to bleed out in hospital parking lots is a debunked myth. She still hasn't caught on to the fact that we're not stupid. No one's buying this anymore. For some reason, Megan hasn't caught on to it. And instead of coming with something refreshing, she's coming with something old and stale that is meaningless. She could have really delved into this issue. Maybe she could have interviewed some women and girls who have been through this, who have been forced to compete against boys and men. Maybe she could have interviewed Riley Gaines. But of course, she cannot think outside the box. She's incapable of doing that. And that's why she is known more for being woke than being a good soccer player. She claims that all girls will be subjected to invasive genital exams to play sports. No, it's called a cheek swab. There's nothing invasive about a cheek swab, especially compared to what athletes have to do, all the examinations they have to do anyway. When it comes to drug testing, physicals, a cheek swab is nothing.
Birth certificates can be changed to reflect something that is not accurate in 44 states and across the world. The IOC is now requiring a once-in-a-lifetime test, ultimately testing for the SRY gene. This is only expressed and present in males. Biology does not lie, chromosomes do not lie. Inevitably, people will say that this is incredibly invasive. I'm here to combat that. It is a simple cheek swab. That is it. Or, you can literally spit into like a tube. That's it. It's not invasive, it's not intrusive, it's cheap, and it's accurate. What is far more invasive is the drug tests we had to take in college, which of course I never complained about this. I understood why this was necessary, but you would go into a bathroom stall, someone would be watching you, like standing in the stall. You would pull your pants down, lift your shirt up, do a 360 spin, and pee in a cup while someone's watching you. That's far more invasive than a cheek swab. I was a college athlete during COVID. I remember getting my brain tickled by a Q-tip. Far more invasive than a cheek swab.
She also laments that only girls will have to prove their biological sex, not boys. And what does that tell you? It is women's sports that is being threatened. It is women's sports that is being ruined by male athletes infiltrating our sports. It is the opportunities of women and girls that is being taken away.
And I'm just focused on the things that are actual threats. And that's what kind of brings me back to this 10 out of 510,000.
Mm-hmm.
They love to cite what the NCAA said, that there are 10 athletes. That's just the NCAA. What about the high school level? Even in middle school, we had girls protesting because they didn't want to compete against a boy. And that boy, backed by a bunch of woke organizations, took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And that boy was allowed into their locker room. And we have had girls come forward and accuse that boy of sexual harassment.
Do you believe there should be other limits? She says this is step one, in her view, on pushing trans people out of public life. Should there be bans in other areas or something that you're pushing for that would limit the rights of trans people in other areas of public life?
Because of the differences in the male body to the female body, it's appropriate that when sex matters, we recognize it in the law. And let's talk about Becky Pepper-Jackson in this moment.
Let me just stop you there for a second. Where do you believe sex matters specifically?
I think it matters on the athletic field, and we can see the evidence of that. Becky Pepper-Jackson displaced and defeated 470 girls 1,400 times during his middle school career. Took 2 regional championships and 1 state championship, sexually harassed and threatened with vile language to violate another woman in the locker room. That's what we're talking about here. Our girls deserve equal opportunities on the field and privacy in their locker rooms.
And to follow up on the question, do you believe she is concerned that there will be other efforts, right, in public life? So you said where sex matters. You're talking specifically, I know, about sports and on the field. Are there other areas that you believe sex matters that you would be pushing for?
I think that sex matters in private spaces. I think that in our dorm rooms and in our locker rooms, we shouldn't be forced or shamed because we don't want to undress in front of a male. When a male, like Becky Pepper-Jackson, which this actually happened, threatens to put male genitalia into one of the female teammates, you know that body parts matter, and that's what this case was about.
You're talking about elite athletes, NCAA, and forgetting girls at the high school level, girls at the middle school level. Young girls having to go to court when they should be enjoying their high school careers, when they should be concentrating on studying and playing and participating in the sports they love. Not having to convince the courts that they shouldn't have to compete against boys. Not having to lay out everything they've lost. It doesn't just affect them while they're competing on the track, on the field, on the court. It affects them when they apply for scholarships, when they apply to colleges.
I think it's really important to understand that when women compete against women, it is fair. When you put a man in women's athletics, it's not fair. And women have nowhere else to go. If you take away the fairness in our sports, we literally have nowhere else to go. But when men compete against men, it is fair. And when women compete against women, it is fair. And so in order to protect the opportunities that I had in college to get a scholarship, to get an education, for all of the future generations of women, it is so important that we can recognize that women should only compete against women.
They've had their opportunities limited because they've had to compete against boys. And Megan Rapinoe, if she had had to compete against teams that allow male players, we wouldn't know her name. The same goes for Sue Bird.
For her to say that you're a bigot and you have hate in your heart if you don't think trans women, biological men, belong in your sport, it shocked me and disappointed me. And I think maybe convenient because it was at the end of her career. Because she knows she would never have been Megan Rapinoe as we know her if boys had been allowed to compete on her teams, even in elementary, junior high school. What's your thought when you see true leaders, probably players that you have looked up to your whole life, going against something that's so obvious?
Megan Rapinoe was actually like my soccer childhood hero. I always tried to emulate her whenever I was on the field. For her to take the stance that biological reality doesn't matter was so sad and heartbreaking to me. All of these athletes in other sports are standing up for the little girls who are in there, and I continue to be let down by members of the U.S. women's national team, and that's how many of the soccer players have felt.
Out of touch, ladder pulling women who claim to be feminists. They are a disgrace. And they actually spoke about more important problems that we should be focusing on.
So back to the whole idea of protecting women and girls in sports, like I said, I'm all for that. I just want to focus on the things that are actually the threat. And Angel Reese's AI images, the fact that both Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers just had stalkers arrested.
In real life.
Arrested
in real life.
In the last couple months.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know better than anybody what's happened in the NWSL with the sexual abuse findings detailed in the Yates report.
They had the nerve to cite sexual abuse. How is letting boys into the locker room with girls, how is letting men into women's locker rooms going to help fight against sexual abuse? Think about it. How stupid do you have to be advocating for boys to be allowed into the girls' locker room, but yet talking about how we need to be focused on more important issues such as SA? They talk about, you know, there's women who are being stalked in the WNBA. Caitlin Clark was stalked. Caitlin Clark has security. And thankfully, her stalker was arrested.
At the end of the day, to me, it comes back to everything we just talked about with the abuse that we see online. Like, that's where we can really protect women in sports.
Again, to have that show up in real life. Caitlin Clark just had a stalker arrested in Indianapolis. Paige Becker's stalker was in Connecticut, close to the school somewhere. I've, been able to see that in a public forum and nobody really do anything about it other than the security that's, detailing Caitlin and detailing Paige.
Young girls in high school, they don't have security following them around. They rely on the school to protect them. Young girls in middle school who had to listen to that foul language and those threats from a boy that was allowed into their locker room. They rely on the school to protect them. And guess what? For the longest time now, schools have left girls unprotected.
How are they allowed to get into the girls' locker room? Did they say, "Oh, I identify as a girl"?
Yeah, I guess at school it's just you gotta look like a girl and then identify as one, and that's what gets you in. Like, I don't know. It's not like we have teachers like making sure who goes or monitoring who's going in and not, and whoever. But yeah, so they just walk right in. It's free to everyone.
That is bizarre.
Once gender identity determines whether a man can go into the women's locker room, any man can go into that locker room. And we've had girls talking about boys hanging out in the locker room.
That's the thing. They're not athletes, and I don't believe they're really doing any sports at all. It's just pure lounging around, hanging out in the locker room as a social space.
Hanging out in the locker room because they're allowed to, so why not, in their minds? This is what young girls have had to deal with. And Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird want to live in this fantasy world where they're pushing lies and trying to convince us that it's better for women and girls for boys to be allowed to compete in their category and everything that comes with that, such as the locker room situation. That's supposed to be better for women and girls? Who are you kidding? So no, you are not fooling anybody, Megan. Nobody's buying it anymore. And if you want to actually have some impact and be relevant again, catch up with the times. Catch up with the reality of what women and girls really have to go through because of people like you who advocate for it. And this is probably the most absurd line from the article. She says, preventing girls from playing sports is the whole point. Absurd as it sounds, it's because in her mind, when she says girls, she's including boys. She's including male athletes when she says girls. That's how confused and messed up these people are. Like I've said, female categories were introduced so that women could actually play sports. It's hard to imagine, but there was a time when girls would go to school and there would be no sports for them to participate in. Only the boys got to participate. That's why they fought so hard for Title IX. So don't tell me that the female category isn't important and it's okay to just experiment with it and let boys compete in that category. That directly excludes girls. So no, the legislation is not to prevent girls from playing sports. The legislation is to ensure that girls can play sports safely and fairly without boys. It protects the female category, the very category that was introduced so that girls could actually play sports in the first place. If you care about women's sports, you would not be advocating for boys and men to compete in female categories. It's as simple as that. This woman has no credibility, and at this point, Marie-Claire has no credibility in platforming this nonsense. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video. And a huge thanks to all of those who have hyped my videos. It is greatly appreciated.